Okay, Mandy, you set up something in regards to the Unknown Morning Show where people can buy us coffee, right?
Because we love coffee.
We love coffee.
Yeah.
That's kind of the whole genesis of the Unknown Morning Show. And some people have taken us up on the offer.
They have. We've had a couple people buy us several coffees.
Yes. It's great. David Massey?
David Massey, longtime family friend of mine, huge supporter since I was a little kid. He's supported everything I've done and been incredibly encouraging.
Including this.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, David. And also Brian Sterling. Brian, thank you so much for your coffee contributions. We are definitely going to, when we take a break and head to our favorite coffee place, we will have a cup on you. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, David.
Thank you so much. Okay, here we go.
Test.
Roll music.
Let's roll it.
Welcome to the Unknown Morning Show.
It's the show where we explore radio,
Podcasting,
TV,
gear,
gearheads,
and making money with a hot mic and other stuff too.
This is the Unknown Morning Show.
I'm Mandee Montana.
And I'm Chuck McKinley. On the Unknown Morning Show today, Matthew Williams. Thank you so much for joining us today, Matt. We appreciate it.
Hey, you guys must be starving for guests or something.
Well, we've thought
we are.
We've thought that kidnapping or rendition is probably next.
Yeah, because I mean, this is pretty much going to be your Aunt Tilly after this one. Tell us about your upper plate, Aunt Tilly. Oh well, they've got this new glue.
We're going to kind of back up way back a little bit here. You are the son of legendary broadcaster Bruce Williams. You have
one of three sons.
One of three sons. You have
two daughters.
And let me throw this at you because it was kind of rolling around in my head. And I was reading your dad's bio online, and I was looking to get some information on YouTube. And I was kicking around some things, and so especially after Rush Limbaugh passed, you would hear people say Rush Limbaugh saved AM radio. Now, when I got started in radio in 77, the station I was at, we were top 40. We had Larry King overnight, and in the market, I believe, like in Rochester, Minnesota, I'm sure they had your dad. But what I wanted to ask is, do you feel that people like Larry and your dad weren't given enough credit, for really, getting the talk format going?
Yeah. Well, look, there's been talk radio since Marconi invented the radio, okay? I was a kid, and we used to have to listen to talk radio through static. Dad, please, no. There's been talk radio, guys, and there's nothing new under the sun. And I would preface this with anything I say here is my opinion. Okay,
That's fine.
I have no bona fides to be saying this stuff, but there's no question as to Rush Limbaugh's contribution to radio in general, AM radio in particular. But here's, in my opinion, the three things that changed radio in general, AM radio in particular, and they're in order of them happening. And at the same time, in the order of their importance. The first one was Larry King, okay? Larry King proved that you could have a Jew from New York be accepted in Kansas as long as he was interviewing good guests. They, prior to, even in our lifetimes, Chuck, you had to sound like you were from Nebraska. Everybody was trying to sound like Walter Cronkite. Regional accents have gone away, and I think it's a loss, quite frankly, but regional accents have gone away. So you had this guy, you had this Jewish guy who sounded, so Brooklyn, okay? Yeah. And he was using Yiddish expressions like shet, slap, and shtup, and hazarai, stuff like that. And he was meeting famous people, and it got to the point, well, look, he's a good interviewer, and I like to hear it. You had My Father's was next. And the reason my father's contribution was, it proved that people would listen to somebody who wasn't interviewing somebody. They had a guy, just a schlub from East Orange, New Jersey, okay, who had at one time in his life had to make a decision whether to be a racket guy or a straight up guy. My mother wouldn't be married to a racketeer, so he had to give up that kind of work, okay?
Okay.
And he was already pretty successful when he got into the radio business. He proved that people would listen to a guy's life experience, and they would take how he gave it to him. He was a regular guy. He could relate to that kind of thing. And the thing that Rush Limbaugh did was he proved you could do it in the daytime. Because up until that point, and I God rest his soul, my father even missed this one. And frankly, I was ahead of my time on this one, is that the way we worked it was, you, in radio, they always said had to be local. There's even still guys hanging on to that. Okay, it has to be local. I wanted it to be all network. I said to my father, I said, Pop, why don't we go all network? And he says, nope, radio's got to be local in the daytime. Why? Oprah Winfrey's not local. That's TV. That's different. And that's what you get in our business. My dad became the guy that he fought against when they were telling him the network thing won't work. That was his idea. That nighttime talk net was his idea. It was rejected. I'll tell you that story if you're interested. But
yes,
Limbaugh, King, my father, the way it worked in the beginning was there's a pie, as you know, and that pie's divided up into slices. And what we got was radio from a more talented place, a pool that we could get locally. And we didn't have to pay the guy in our hard money. We paid him in inventory, which was vast by the time I got into it, was vast becoming more available. Money was getting less, but inventory was getting more. So we've got this 12-slice pie, of which they got 4 of the slices. And everybody in radio was convinced that the local radio stations, particularly in the top 10 markets, wouldn't give up a slice. And that was true in the very beginning. But pretty soon they were forced to. They had to. They couldn't turn down the popularity. So Limbaugh's bunch, it was Ed McLaughlin, who was the former head of NBC, or ABC, friend of my father's, a guy named Bruce Marr, who found Limbaugh out in Sacramento. There's another story about them bringing Limbaugh to my father's apartment to convince this guy to go on the air. He was too scared to go network because what if they don't like me? And he proved it. Then Limbaugh's bunch upended the apple cart even more. They started to charge us not only inventory, but cash. And that really screwed us. And I'll tell you something else that changed. Prior to Rush Limbaugh, everybody's music was made, like my father's TalkNet was he and Sally Jesse Raphael. They had a theme. Someone you talk to, someone who cares, someone who thinks always be there. Tune in, turn on, TalkNet. You're there. And that was theirs. They paid for it. Somebody wrote it. Well, Limbaugh comes along. Remember, he was a disc jockey. He comes along with quote bumper music end quote, which nobody heard about. Now we're on the hook to the CSAC and those guys. So there was more expense because he started playing all this kind of music. And for years we denied it, but of course they caught us in the long run. And so now the talk radio stations got stuck paying CSAC fees and ASCAP fees because he was playing. He's the first guy. Now everybody does it, so we were paying the fees anyway. But when he came on, we weren't paying any of those fees. Only the music stations were paying them. And that's the order, I think, of the guys who changed. Now there were precursors to all of them. Bernie Meltzer in New York was doing what my father was doing. My father did it better. There's a guy named Dave Ramsey who's kind of doing it, but he's got the internet now. And there's guys out there saying, hey, if the red tag at Costco, this means this. They didn't actually have to live it. Okay. And the internet changed all that.
And do you think, Matt, that when you think about your dad and doing financial advice radio, that set the stage for financial news?
Here's the thing. Everybody says he did financial advice, okay?
Yeah.
He did almost no financial advice. Very little. Look back. It's almost none. His crap was more, I got a neighbor whose fence is 2 feet over mine. Now, what would you do? That was the kind of crap he did.
So it was life stuff.
And it was because he lived it. He had a neighbor who put his thing over there. He was, he did no preparation for his show. None, 0, 9.
Wow, he just got in there and did it,
He didn't have to. All right, let me ask you a question. Mandee, you're in the music. as I remember, you were in the music radio business, right?
I was, yes, that's correct.
If I were to start asking you questions about the music radio business, even if it was every day, would you have to do any prep for that?
Probably not a lot of prep, no.
Almost none, because you lived it, you
Because
did
I lived it.
It
You're
was
right.
what you were doing.
Yep.
Well, that was him. They were just asking him these questions. They were just asking him questions about his life.
Yeah.
He had done so many things. He was a cab driver. He worked for mobsters. I could tell you a story about my dad every day for a year, and I'd never tell the same damn story. Some of them are kind of politically incorrect, but they're still true stories. And he was just living his life. Now, at the end of his career, if I had my way, my father would have died on the air the last day of his stint with NBC. Or I don't know who owned it by then. It started out as Westwood One, which was the address of the house of where I think his name started. That's how Westwood One. They started in a little house on Westwood Avenue. It was number 1 Westwood Avenue in like some bullshit town in California.
Wow.
But I wish my dad would have died, had a heart attack over the microphone, because the rest of his life sucked after that. Because he didn't need money, for God's sakes, but he needed the drug I wouldn't wish on anybody of fame. And so he started to do, and he didn't have the detail oriented. He was going to do a show, more of a general interest type show. But those general interest shows take a lot of work. You got to prepare. When I did this kind of thing, and I'm not comparing myself to anybody, but apparently I was better at it than I thought. I was preparing all day for my show, because my show was just crap that happened to me all day long. So by the time I just wrote it or recorded or whatever, so by the time I got to the show, I had a show. I do a radio show in my head every single day. I'm stuck with it. You guys are going to hang up and you're done with me. I'm stuck with me.
Interesting
all
point.
Day long. I'm gonna be asking questions about stuff. A lot of it politically incorrect, but that is just as true as rain. Stuff I observe all day long is a radio show. That was my kind of radio show. My dad's kind of radio show was something he lived, so he didn't have to prepare. And basically, he got lazy. Once he had to start working, he couldn't do it. He thought picking up USA Today and looking at that one section was preparing.
What about having an assistant?
Shit. The only thing good about having an assistant is you gotta take his advice. If it wasn't my dad's idea, it wasn't a good idea.
Okay.
Or if you came up with a good idea, 3 months later, he'd come up with the same one and tell you how great it was. Now, this is not a criticism. I worshipped my dad. Okay? I am a dad. I wish I could tell my dad how hard it was to be a dad with a shit like me as a son. Kids are shits. They're shits to their parents. They will forgive anything and anybody but a parent, okay? When I was a kid, I wanted my dad to be like everybody else's dad. I just wanted him to blend in, okay? I'll give you a story. We were poor. And my dad managed to scrape together enough money to rent this little 1-bedroom bullshit beach house down in the Jersey Shore, the prettiest coastline in the country, and I've been to them all. We go down to the beach. Now, here's a kid from East Orange, New Jersey. He's a city kid, right? A rough, street kid. And there's all these guys on the beach, and they got these big giant fishing poles, and they're throwing the fishing poles out. And my father will talk to anybody. He goes up to the guy. He says, "Hey, pal, let me ask you a question. What's with the big ass fishing pole and you throw it out?" Our family made a deal with fish a long time ago. You don't bother us, we won't bother you. and so we can't catch fish. So the guy says, "Well, here's the theory. We got the big poles because we can whip this thing way out, and the further out, then you leave it there. Maybe there'll be fish out, or you pull it on." And so my dad goes, so in theory, the further out it goes, the better your chance of catching the fish. Guy says, "Yeah." The next day, we're on the beach with a big fishing pole and a bow and arrow. I go, and I'm dying. I go, what are you doing? He goes, listen, if you catch more fish, right, the boat will get out there and blah, blah, blah. So the first time we tried, of course, it doesn't work because now you got the arrow is attached to the line, like all experiments. Then he figures out a breakaway arrow, but now we lose the arrow. So how many arrows we got to have, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I'm humiliated. And so finally, he says to me, Matt, are you okay? I said, Pa. I said, he goes, am I embarrassing you, son? I said, well, he goes, listen, son, do you really care what those ham and eggers think? And the thing was, he was a ham and egger, but he was thinking, I won't always be a ham and egger. And he said, if you worry about what people think, son, and I'll never, but all I wanted was my dad to be like everybody else, to blend in. But that wasn't going to happen. And my kids tell me now, Jesus, all we wanted was a dad who blended in. But you wouldn't blend in, Dad. I said, really? I didn't think I was like, oh, Jesus, Dad, you stood out like a sore thumb. I mean, and you did everything, you blah, 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 blah. Then I had one teacher wanted to flunk me because of stuff you said on the radio. And I said, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Oh, yeah. And then I had other teachers that would pass her if she stabbed them in the eye with a pencil because of what I said. She had one teacher who liked me so much, they caught her with a gun in school because she was a competitive shooter, which I'm a competitive shooter. I passed out to her. And back in those days, it wasn't that bad, but somebody said she's got a gun in school. Well, she did. It was locked in a case. Well, once he found out she was my daughter, he goes, just bring it in here, and you can check it out at the end of the day. So,
wow.
You get the good with the bad.
Yeah.
My dad used to say this all the time. He was a small-town politician, and he used to tell us, you get a lot of advantages being my kid, but you got a lot of disadvantages, too. You can't do a lot of stuff other kids do, I mean, we weren't, cops would bring us home before they'd arrest us. Because my dad had done a favor he went back to our town like 70 years later and went and asked for a favor about something. And I mean, I said, did you ever say no to anybody? He goes, I don't remember saying no. He goes, I thought my job as a politician was to help people. And he goes, I did. And he was a good politician. Nice. He did things this was before the Open Meetings Act. They used to go to this bar. Now, remember, I lived in a very rural town, a little bullshit bar. It was a stagecoach stop from the 1700s. Everywhere in New Jersey, George Washington took a leak. Everywhere. It was just, George Washington peed here. Anyhow, they would sit down, and as he described it, and I quote, they whacked up the town. He said, they would get there. And I'm a little kid, and I used to go to council meetings. I used to go on campaigns with them and stuff. And one day, we were having a party, and I said, hey, who's coming to your party, Pop? And he named all these people, and he named a bunch of the guys in the council. I said, one guy, Mr. Driver? Yeah. I go, isn't he a Democrat? He goes, yeah. He goes, what? He goes, I saw you two almost come to fight at the council meeting. He goes, oh, son. Don't use your last name for a while. You can't be this stupid. I said, what, Pop? He goes, you didn't believe all that bullshit, did you? I said, what do you mean? He goes, we whacked that up at Freddy's. Look, he had to pretend. He had to scream and yell. He knew he wasn't getting his way, but I gave him something else. But he's got constituents just like everybody else. He's got to scream at me. He's got to throw stuff. I got to tell him I can take him, blah, blah, blah. We're giggling inside.
Wow.
I said, really? He said, that's how the sausage gets made, son. Mm-hmm. And he was, I think we made good sausages. I think we did good things for the town. I didn't always get what I wanted. They didn't always get what they wanted. So, but we helped people. As a politician, I admired my dad because he changed. He didn't think the same way at 23 he did at 63 or 83. Things he thought were right at 23. He would say, Matthew, I'm kind of glad I lost that one because maybe there was something worth saving in this world, or, a million things like that. So in that regard, I admired him greatly. He was a very different guy. He was never the same after fame. He was not the man I knew once he got famous.
buy me a cup of coffee, Mandy.
Yeah.
I've seen that on other podcasts. That's literally...
Yeah, it's like a virtual tip jar. It's really that simple. So you go to the show notes, click Buy Me a Coffee, and then you have an opportunity to support the show in any way you like. Imagine yourself going to coffee with Chuck and myself and saying, hey, I like what you do on the show. I'm going to buy you a cup of coffee. Only all you have to do is click a link. It's that simple.
But you know what? It's like in the radio business, and I always use myself as an example, Matt. I was in music radio for 33 years, and just because things change, job gets eliminated, somebody in New York says, we can't have two country programmers in one chain in Tyler, I get eliminated. So I ended up doing a couple things. The next thing I end up in sports talk. I work with you for a while, right? Doing mornings over at 99.3 Talk FM.
I don't think you give yourself enough credit. And Mandy, I don't know how long you've known Chuck.
20 years.
But Chuck, you are a survivor, and you're also, I'm going to say zealot, if you can say zealot in a nice way.
Sure.
One of the, I think, and Mandy, I don't know you well enough, but if you're still doing this, I think you love radio.
I do.
And I think Chuck loves radio.
Well, it's always a challenge, too.
There was a lot more of that just before my generation and even into my generation, okay? You know, you heard the old stories. I swept up at the station and they finally let me change a record. You know what I mean?
Sure. Do Sunday mornings.
Yeah. Sunday mornings,
games,
6 to noon, ball games.
You did whatever you had to do.
Yeah, you alphabetize the program director's CDs because you're just trying to make that $6 an hour.
And how many times did you have to swallow so hard because some guy walked in and said, nobody wants to hear that or whatever? I mean, it's very difficult. I think Paul Gleiser probably loves radio.
Oh, yeah.
Who was the guy? Remember Mike, the guy who did the mornings every time? But I don't know. I know you know, but Mandy, I don't know if you ever knew what kind of schedule that guy kept in the morning. He did it all. He showed up at like 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. He did all the downloads, all the feeds, all the cuts, the guy was a radio like radio was. He did it all.
Yeah.
He was. Now, it wasn't my kind of radio anymore. But that work ethic of radio, he knew how to do every aspect of the radio station, everything. Mm-hmm. And I know that because he caught me turning up the power several times. I, on the other hand, was only in it for the money.
So is that why, Matt, and we'll go over here, you got into radio ownership?
No, that wasn't why.
What happened? How did that happen? Tell us.
I was in the car business. I was a mechanic by trade. I got kicked out of school for something. I don't want to go through all that. I was in a Catholic school.
I get it.
I don't know. I wasn't a bad kid. I was just a little shit. Anyway, they kicked me out, and they said, you can come back next year if I bought a car and I sold it for more money during that time, and blah, 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 blah. And next thing I knew, I bought and sold so many cars that they wouldn't let me buy them anymore unless I got a dealer's license. But you couldn't get a dealer's license until you were 18, I think. So I started registering all the cars in my brothers and sisters' names, and they were children, 7, 8. And,
what were you, 17?
I was 16. 17,
wow.
17.
You're an enterprising individual.
And I don't know. It didn't seem like it at the time.
And were you like the same size you are now? In other words, you were a big kid too, right?
Yeah, I didn't grow that much. I was 6'1".
It was easy for you to pass as an 18-year-old. Okay.
No. You could own a car. You couldn't be a car dealer.
Okay.
And you couldn't own so many cars without being a car dealer. So I started registering so they said, you can't register these cars in their name. They're not even old enough to drive. I said, the state of New Jersey doesn't require you to drive a car to own it. And they didn't. And they changed They ended up changing that law because of me. Because I was registering it in 7-year-olds' names. Anyway, I got in that car. I got in that business. I went to college on a football scholarship. I was a very, very terrible football player. My father, I was offered 2 jobs when I got a football coach at a college and a ski instructor. And I was too scared to tell my father about it because my father wasn't going to have that. So anyway, we got in the business of renting used cars, which I didn't want to do, but my father was hard to say no to. I'm at a card table in Atlantic City, and we're playing 21, and it's like one of those 24-hour sessions. And this guy next to me, I am opening up these little storefronts for renting cars. Now, see, I'm stupid and I don't know anything, but this guy has a lot of. He owned the, what do you call it, franchises? The like Hertz and Avis and all that.
Okay.
So every time he opened up a place, I opened up a place next door to him because he was smart and I wasn't. I figured, well, he knows what he's doing. He's doing the research. So I meet this guy, believe it or not, at a card table. I meet him at a card table in Atlantic City at a casino, and he goes, "So you're a flea who's been biting me in the ass." I said, "Yeah, I don't know how else to do it. I mean, I just figure you know what you're doing." He goes, "Well, what do you take to get out of the business?" I write a number on a napkin. I give it to him. He goes, "All right, call my lawyer Monday." So now,
so much for fleas.
I got my father, who was anti-fun. "Pop, you want to get a boat? Aren't they fun yet?" "No, let's not get it." He told me he never wanted to see me on a golf course unless I had the contract to cut the grass. He was tough. Anyway, unlike him, very unlike my father, who was anti-fun and couldn't have any fun, didn't have enough money to have fun.
You always seemed like a fun guy.
No, not really. But he uncharacteristically said, "Son, you've got 2 things right now you'll probably never have again at the same time. You got plenty of money and plenty of time. Why don't you go out and do something stupid?" It was so unlike my dad. He goes, I said, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah, maybe someday you'll have a lot of money and no time. Or maybe sometimes you'll have a lot of time but no money. Go do something." So I bought a boat and just went sailing. Took off. You can only do that for so long. I knew it was time to come home. I walked into I'd been there. I was sailing up and down the East Coast and in New England because I went to school in New England. And I walked into a little bookstore and I berated the little girl in there who's like part-time help. You know the guy who shows his ass, the guy that you really hate. Well, that was me. I'm in a pair of shorts. I'm real blonde and tan. I'm wearing, t-shirt ripped. And I say, "What kind of hillbilly podunk doesn't have the Wall Street Journal? I can't believe blah, 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 blah." And I go on and she takes it the whole time. And when I'm finally done, she goes, "Well, we carry the Wall Street Journal, so, but it's not published on Sunday." I didn't know what day it was. I had no idea. Time had no meaning anymore. I went back to this little joint. My brother was ordering breakfast for us. I said, "My boat," and it was my boat. I said, "My boat's leaving in a half an hour. You're going to be on it or not?" And I left. Came back, sold the boat. My father and I were looking for something to do, and we saw an ad in a trade map peg that said, blah, 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 Gladewater, Texas. It's old, but it works. So I came out here. I did a very extensive market research. I drove up and down and said, "That looks okay to me."
And then you owned a radio station, huh?
Check this out. I drove up 271 to Highway 80, went through downtown Gladewater, which at the time was all boarded up, stopped at the corner of 80 and 271 at a convenience store. First of all, I got off the plane from Tampa, Florida, and I never thought there was a place on earth hotter than Tampa, Florida. I get off, and back then you could still get off on the tarmac at DFW. Mm-hmm. It was like getting punched in the face by a kiln. Mm-hmm. And this is when Dallas was big and JR and everything, and nobody had a cowboy hat on. I was so disappointed. And I drove there, and I went into the convenience store. There was a bunch of guys hanging around. I said, "Hey, if you fellas from around here?" They go, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, how is it?" And they go, "It sucks. It sucks around here." I said, "Why does it suck?" And they said, "Because the oil business is in the ground. It's terrible. It's shot." And that was 88, if you remember it was.
Yeah.
Or 87. And I said, "Whoa, there was oil here?" No, I was thinking of tumbleweeds and stuff. And they looked at me and I said,
It's in West Texas, I bet.
The East Coast was booming. And I said, well, where I'm from, it's booming. Why don't you move? I'd never leave East Texas. And I got to thinking, if people will stay here when it sucks, man, it must be something when it's good. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I drove up and down. The two guys who sold it to us stuck it in me so deep and broke it off. Not so much on the price. The price was right, but the terms, everything. We made a bad deal because my father was so high up by then, he didn't think. And I was so young and stupid. All I knew about my radio was my car had one. And so I took over March 1st. My license was approved March 1st, 1988. And I started losing $10,000 a month, every month.
Wow.
And that was in 1988. $10,000 bought a lot. I didn't want to get up in the morning. I couldn't sleep. What did I do? I'm running out of money. I mean, my father's got money, but he ain't going to put in more than his half. And I'm running out of my half. And it was a very, very uncomfortable time. First day do you remember Dub Murray?
Oh, yeah.
Dub Murray, that old bastard. I used to be Doc Holliday in Little Rock, What do I care? First week on the job, he gets off the air with Radio on the Radio, which was my biggest biller, which was like $8,000 a month. And it was like $3 a commercial. He goes, come in, get in your office, boy. I need to talk to you. That's what he's talking about. I own this place. He says, you know what your problem is, boy? And I said, I'm 30. He's like 60 something. I said, well, I'm sure you're going to tell me, sir. He said, you don't know what the fuck you're doing. and I said, you know what? I said, you have no idea how right you are. However, I said, you have no idea. I know less than you think I know. And I said, and here's where life starts to suck. Because I still hold your balls in my hand. Sit down, old man. I'm going to tell you how it is.
How did that?
Did.
So how'd the rest of the conversation go, huh?
That was it. I started telling the facts of life. You live and breathe at my behest, you old bastard. You got nowhere to go. You used to be somebody, but now you're somebody else. You're bringing in $8,000 a month. I'm tipping cocktail waitresses more than that. And don't ever order me in my office again. Get your old ass out of here. I'm not having that from some old man. And eventually I learned how to do it. I'm the guy who killed Radio on the Radio because I think Mandee probably more than you, Chuck, because she probably had to go out on the street a little more. But radio's not about so much who listens, but the perception of people think who listens. Mm-hmm. I walked into a place one time and said, "Yeah, I'm trying to sell radio and radio. I'm trying to sell, Keys Radio." And the guy goes, "Aren't you the guys who sell used chickens?" When I killed Radio on the Radio, a guy named Charlie Rader from Rader Funeral Homes, God rest his soul, he's dead now, came to me and he wanted to kill me. He was on the air, blah, blah, blah. He listened every day. He could buy 50 Cadillacs a month, but the guy at the Cadillac dealer didn't believe a guy like Charlie listened. So the Cadillac dealer's perception became my reality. My kid's ribs started to show because I couldn't feed them. So I had to kill it because I couldn't overcome the perception. I'll tell you, this is a true story. I'm dying. I'm $10,000 a month. I'm going down the drain. I walk into, and what I used to hear was a lot of times I used to hear was I like talk radio. There was no talk radio between Dallas and Shreveport or Dallas and New Orleans at the time. There was none. We were it. So I'd walk into a place and they'd say, I like talk radio. Wink, wink, but I'm a little smarter than the average East Texan. Oh, God. If I had to hear that once, I'd hear it 1,000 times. Everybody's smarter. Everybody only gets Dave Letterman's jokes. Oh, God, everybody. This market's different. Yeah, they're different. People put their pants on different. So one day, Gordon Lively from Lively Cadillac finally calls me, and I've been calling on him, and he says, I've been talking to some friends of mine. Maybe I'll give this little bullshit station here, really, really making me feel good. I'll give you a try. I said, okay, sir, well, when would you like to go on? He says, all right, tomorrow. I said, geez, I'm sorry, Mr. Lively, I don't have any space tomorrow. I ain't got nothing but space. I'm giving stuff away. I haven't sold 3 commercials in like 2 months.
Perception.
And he goes, what do you mean? You've been calling on me? I said, I've been calling on you, yeah, but that was then. This is now. And he goes, well, how much are the commercials? And I told him they were cheap. And he says, when you came in, they were like half that. I go, yeah, you got to recognize a good deal when you see it, Mr. Lively. Inside, I'm ready to lose my bowels. The sweat's pouring down my back because I got to make this work. But I can't drop my pants because I'm dead with this guy. So he says, well, what if I pay you more and you bump somebody, put my commercials in? Now I'm the reluctant virgin and he's got to have me. Mm-hmm. I said, Mr. Lively, how would you feel if I did that to you?
Ooh.
Okay, when can I get on? I said, well, and I forget the rest, but I had nothing. I mean, you talk about I'm all in and I got a deuce, 9, nothing. I'm dead. But that's what we had to go through. We had to do it. Then we started picking on KYKX. What's the worst thing the top dog can ever do? Acknowledge the little guy, right? Mm-hmm. Don't acknowledge them. They're not there. Pat them on the head. Oh, they're so cute. And we went after them. Oh man, poor Ken Curtis. He got his panties in a twist so bad. And we said AM radio, active mind radio, FM radio, feeble mind radio. Hey, you listen to that morning team? I'm Bob. I'm Betty. We're crazy. And
oh man,
we're zany. Any more sound effects? Anyway, one day they make the mistake. They helped. They really helped. They helped make my bones. They started attacking us. People who never heard of us wanted to know who they were attacking. It was so stupid. Mm-hmm. And the next thing you know, we're making money. So it took almost a year, and it was terrible. It was a terrible year. Then I bought that big motorhome and painted it garage. Oh, so I got this place out on. I got this place in Clarksville City. I see. When you're in a major area, you don't know where your radio station comes from, right? You turn on the radio, it comes. You have no idea where they are,
right?
But in this area, they associate the building as to where you are. So I got this Clarksville City building. So I tell the guy goes, what are you doing in town? He says, I said, I bought a radio station, but where is it? I said, I live in Gladewater. I said, well, it's in Clark. It's right up on the hill there. Where do you work? Longview. I go, you pass it twice a day. He goes, I've never seen it. So I paint it bright orange with purple shutters or something.
I remember.
And I said, that some bitch will notice it now.
Yeah.
And then, we did all kinds of stuff like that. And like Chuck, I know knows this, but Mandy knows this. All I heard when I moved here was, well, you can sell either in Longview or Tyler. You can't sell them both. They're different people. I said, what's different about them? They're just different. You can't sell it. I said, well, it's not an issue for me because my signal doesn't get into Tyler, so I'm stoked. So we're doing okay, but we're not in any great shakes. So I called my dad. I said, I got an idea. I said, there's a little bullshit radio station over there we can buy. And I said, we'll hook the two stations up together and we'll run them like one station. What do you think? He goes, all right. I said, it could go totally bad and lose everything. He goes, well, I won't lose everything, but you'll be dead. So we did. And it's a long story, but I got it done. And I was the first guy in the country to do that.
To simulcast?
In 1989, I forget when. When was President Reagan?
Yeah,
president?
Somewhere in there.
Anyway,
I can't remember when Bush was elected. Was it 88?
There was a rule called the 5 millivolt contour rule. Now, is Steve still doing your
Comer.
Yeah, he could explain it to you. But basically, put a compass in Longview or wherever your tower is, and put a compass in that tower, and draw 2 circles, and they intersect, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Then they do a measurement. If it was 5 millivolts or more overlap, you couldn't own the stations.
Oh.
Back then.
Right.
But if it was less, it wasn't. Well, he relaxed the 5 millivolt contour rule. So I said, let's run a phone line over there, fire everybody, which made me unbelievably popular.
Oh, I bet.
So we'll hire another sales staff and we'll run them as one station we'll have, and that was very, very successful. Then I had to overcome the you can't sell in Tyler. Well, in the 10 years I think I owned that, every month was 55, 45, one way or the other, every month. It's, remember when I came here, we were sub 200. Now we're 250 plus ADI.
Yeah.
Area of dominant influence.
And I think we're right there with Shreveport as far as market ranking too. I believe.
Now it's a much larger market. Of course,
Yes.
It's a lot more competitive a market than it was. But it was real good. I remember one day I was getting gas, and every single person getting gas was listening to my radio station.
Neat.
Wow.
They were all playing, and I thought, wow, Matt, you've really arrived. Felt great about that. And so being from New Jersey, we listen to all. North Jersey is associated with New York. South Jersey is associated with Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh, or Philadelphia. So all our stations that we listened to came out of New York. And there was a show. There was a station called 1010 Wins. Give us 20 minutes, we'll give you the world.
Oh yeah, yep.
And every 20 minutes they repeated the news. So I thought, I'm going to replicate that here. Now this shows you, both of you, how green I am. What I didn't know was about time spent listening. Well, in New York, every time a guy drops out, there's so many people, another guy can fill his hole, right?
Yeah.
Well, in East Texas, you give them 20 minutes and one guy drops out, there's nobody left.
Right.
So that failed miserably. So I said to these people, Glenn was one of them, you know him, Chuck. I said, there was a Star Trek episode called The Menagerie.
Yes.
And
Yep.
they had these people with these big bulbous heads. Those were women, by the way. I don't know if you knew that, Chuck.
Yes.
And they had these big giant heads with veins in them, and they didn't talk. They just thought, but their thought was so powerful you could hear it. And so I said, that's what I want to do. I just want you to just say what's on your mind. And they were terrible. And I kept giving them suggestions. And finally I said, look, I've never been on the radio, or I had, but that's another story. I said, let me just tell you what I think. Let me show you what I think I want, and then you guys come back and do it. Well, they never came back and did it. And it was revolutionary for the time here, okay? I was doing a podcast before I knew what a podcast was, basically. And it wasn't that I was so good at it. It was just that nobody else was doing it. If you're a one-eyed man is king in the land of the blind, right?
Sure.
So I'm making 60% of our revenues coming off 3 hours a day. I'm getting for a commercial, a live commercial in 1990. I'm getting $1,000 in 1990.
Oh.
$1,000 a month just to say one time, go to Big Five Tire.
Wow.
That was when commercials were going for $8. It was, so I do that, and things are, now we're starting to make money, everything. So this just shows you, I just was about the money. Don Imus started to syndicate, and I grew up listening to Imus, in New Jersey. And I thought, well, hell, if I can make this much money, how much money can I make with Imus? So I give up the slot. I said, what do I care? I'm just in it for the money. I never made the money again, ever.
Yeah.
That was the death knell for me in the morning.
So when you put Imus in the morning, it killed it, huh?
No, I died. Never made the money.
Why didn't you just go back and do the show yourself again?
Because by that time, we were getting an offer from that guy, and I didn't want to.
Okay.
I didn't want to step in it because it was all about that's a funny story too. When those guys approached me for this is inside baseball, I know that, but you remember when I started in a radio business, you could only own 7 AMs and 7 AMs in the country, and they couldn't be in the same markets.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That was it. Well, then they deregulated.
Yep.
And when I bought Keys Radio was at the highest valuation it had ever been since Marconi invented the radio. And in less than a year, it was at the lowest it was ever been.
Wow.
You talk about buy high, sell low. Mm-hmm. My father knew a guy in Boston paid $16 million for a radio station and sold it for $6 million.
Whoa.
Ooh.
You know what? That's a hickey. I don't care who you are.
Oh, sure.
The radio business was in the shits.
Yep.
So this guy that turns out my father ended up knowing, I ended up knowing, he was in the radio business. He gets together a bunch of people, $1 million buy-in. He says, what are you getting on your investments? I don't know, whatever they're getting. He says, I'll get you more. Give me $1 million. We're going to go around buying radio stations and you'll get more money, more return on your investment. So he approaches my father and myself. And I am making a much better than average living at this point, and I'm getting divorced. So I really can't go and, I want to stay with my kids and everything. So I just say thank you, but no thank you. Well, they go out. I think they had $18 million to spend. And they go out and they start spending the money. Well, they keep coming back to me, and I keep telling them thank you, no thank you. Unbeknownst to me, they think I'm playing the reluctant virgin. They think it's a negotiating tactic. And so they just keep raising the price. I wasn't. I didn't want to sell because my divorce and everything. So finally, they call us, and I called my father. I said, Pop, at this price, we got to go. We're going to like 10 times what we paid for the place. Plus, we've been making money. So I said, but I don't understand what they're going to pay us for this radio station. I'm running this place. And they can't make a living at that. They can't service the debt. I'm running this place. They can't. It's too much money for the radio station. God love my father. He goes, all right, let me see if I got this straight. Matthew Williams wants to tell a guy who's been able to talk 16 people into giving him $1 million how to do business. Is that what I'm hearing? And I go, all right, point made. And he goes, second of all, if they come up with the money, what the fuck do you care? I go, third point, well taken. Or second point, well taken. He goes, and thirdly, son, you don't understand. They don't have to service a debt. I said, well, what do you mean? He goes, they're just going to print more stock and screw the stockholders. They don't give a damn. They got a printing press. He goes, they'll just dilute the shit out of the stock and tell their investors they're on the hook this year. Which I never, I didn't know, and I wasn't sophisticated. I didn't know anything about that. And so that's how we made the decision to sell.
Wow.
Guys like Paul, they stayed in it when it was tough. I admire him for that so much. You'll never know. Mm-hmm. I was just about the money. It was just money for me. It was just a way to sell soap. That's all it was. Nobody, you only, the newspaper, people understand the newspaper just prints news, so you'll come read ads. The radio station just has guys like on. And, we did a good job with the talk radio, but it was mostly because I made the decision to go mostly network. And I got the best guys. Who wants to be around? Mandee, you've seen them come and go. Chuck, you really have, being a producer. Everybody thinks they're the next best thing.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
They're the big thing. Who wants to put up with that crap? I didn't. I'd rather give the inventory up. I'd rather get a guy who's next. Now, that's bad for the business because now these guys have nowhere to practice their craft. They're not ready, and they want to be on the network, and they're not ready. But, I'm out, so I really don't care. But it's just I was just in it for the money.
Well, now that's happening in music radio, Matt. I'm not sure how aware or how much you followed it, but
none.
The same concept has transitioned into music radio to where you have a handful of talented people at a corporation that record a generic show, and it goes to 50 stations across the country, more or less, and people like me that have a local job in Tyler, Texas, are now out of it because they can't afford to pay me a livable wage that makes business sense for the investors when they can pay somebody that's doing a show for 50 markets. So it's the industry has completely changed, which is why I'm doing the podcast now versus.
Yeah, well, someday maybe I can buy you lunch, Mandee, and you can tell me, how do you make money at a podcast?
You don't.
Okay, because I'm not interested in doing anything I don't.
No, you can't.
I'm not interested in doing anything I don't.
You really can. You really can do it, but you've got to sell it.
Did you know that your business, the music business, the corporate music business, helped guys like me make money?
Oh, yeah.
Because when you're in a car like a cop or a salesman or whatever, right?
Yep.
You've heard you're going to hear this song this many times an hour, this song this many times. It's all a decision made somewhere. The day of where Mandee could say, hey, I got this new thing. See what you think. That's over.
Yeah. Oh, Mandee, it's been over.
You get no. Yeah, right. You get no. So the guys who were listening all the time to music they were just driven to us out of desperation.
I know.
They couldn't take it anymore. When I got Limbaugh, all right, everybody, they kill me about this. Oh, you guys, when you got him, I never made a nickel off the Rush Limbaugh show.
Really?
I never made a dime.
Did you have to pay for it cash too?
No, we did at the end, but not in the beginning. Here's the thing. Rush Limbaugh he was doing this show out there, and then, you gotta remember, back in those days, there was 3 places. There was 3 satellites. That was it. There was 3 satellites with a couple of places on each of them. So they were coveted spots. You couldn't just say, I got a good guy, I'm going to put on a show. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you had to inherit one. Well, there was a guy named Owen Spann. He did a network radio show, and he was injured in an accident. And Eddie McLaughlin from ABC, it was an ABC satellite, said, we'll take that satellite spot. We think we got a guy. They were so broke that they couldn't even afford a studio. So they went to ABC in New York, and they said, we'll do, meaning Limbaugh, we'll do 3 hours of a local show for you to pay for the satellite time, and then we'll do 3 hours of satellite. Can you imagine 6 hours of talk radio, buddy? That guy was an Iron Man.
Oh, yeah.
And he had to do the same show over again, basically. And Mandee, Chuck, you know what that's like. Okay?
Oh, yeah.
Once you say something, you think it's done. He has to say it all over again. He did that for like 4 years till they could afford their own studio, okay? You don't understand. When I got Limbaugh, they were picketing me. Picketing the station.
Really?
Now, back then, Baptist preachers had a little more stroke than they do now. They don't have any now. But back then, they had a little stroke. They're picketing. He's terrible. He's going to hell. He does. Remember, he was doing caller abortions and stuff like that. He was poison. I like him, but, Democrats buy Cadillacs, too.
Mm.
You couldn't give the show away. You know what a make good is, obviously.
Yep.
We'd get things all the time. No make goods in Rush Limbaugh. None. 0. Couldn't give the guy away.
Wow.
Now, by the time I sold, he changed a little, but he wasn't changing, but we were changing. Just like everybody used to think we were the only ones who understood Letterman's humor. Remember that, Chuck?
Oh, sure.
I get it, but people like Mandee don't get it. Well, he didn't change. We changed, okay?
Yep.
It just became more mainstream. So now Limbaugh becomes mainstream. So by the time I sell them, you can sell them.
Mm-hmm.
But it took a long time. When I was cleaning out the office before we were gone, there was you're cleaning out all your old files. There was a thing from the affiliate that said, Dear Matt, please, 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 don't cave in under the pressure. Just keep us there. We're going to make it someday. And I compared it with the last one they sent me. They said, Dear affiliate, make sure you get your affiliation fee in on time. So that's, first they're kissing your butt for this, but that's the way it is. And just for both of you in the business, my dad told me one time, he says, I'll be off the air for 3 weeks and they'll be saying, Bruce who? And maybe that's the way it should be.
This has been so awesome.
You guys have been real sweethearts to an old man.
Oh, well, thank you for your time. We know how valuable it is.
Matt, thanks for being here.
It's not very valuable, but it's nice to talk to people who, you're not yes men, and you can empathize. Did you ever see WKRP in Cincinnati?
Oh, God,
yeah,
yes.
Of course, yes.
I thought it was okay, funny, till I got in the radio business. Then I realized it's hysterical.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. All right, y'all. Take care.
Thanks,
Bye, Matt. Thank you.
Before we were gone, there was you're cleaning out all your old files. There was a thing from the affiliate that said, Dear Matt, please, 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 don't cave in under the pressure. Just keep us there. We're going to make it someday. And I compared it with the last one they sent me. It said, Dear affiliate, make sure you get your affiliation fee in on time. So that's, first they're kissing your butt for this, but that's the way it is. And just for both of you in the business, my dad told me one time, he says, I'll be off the air for 3 weeks and they'll be saying, Bruce who? And maybe that's the way it should be.
This has been so awesome.
You guys have been real sweethearts to an old man.
Oh, well, thank you for your time. We know how valuable it is.
Matt, thanks for being here.
It's not very valuable, but it's nice to talk to people who, A, you're not yes men, and you can empathize. Did you ever see WKRP in Cincinnati?
Oh, God,
Yeah,
yes.
of course, yes.
I thought it was okay, funny, till I got in the radio business. Then I realized it's hysterical.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. All right, y'all. Take care.
Thanks,
Bye,
Matt.
Thank you.
This has been another episode of The Unknown Morning Show.
I'm Mandee Montana.
And I'm Chuck McKinley.
This is our show to explore radio,
Podcasting.
gear,
And the gearheads that use the gear.
and making money with a hot mic.
And other stuff in between.
We'd love for you to follow us on social media as well. Follow us on Facebook at The Unknown Morning Show and Instagram at The Unknown Morning Show. See us on YouTube at The Unknown Morning Show.
Thank you for listening to The Unknown Morning Show.
I'm Mandee Montana.
I'm Chuck McKinley. And remember, be kind and rewind.